Aha. Okay, we're going. Okay, good morning, class. Aha. All right, so this morning we're doing post-war prosperity and civil rights. And to make my life easier, since I'm on the computer, look what I'm using. This is for all of you. This is, by the way, for everybody here, this is Mr. Stain's class, Mr. Estain. See what I'm using? Haha, remember this? Is that where you guys can follow along? And yeah, so I had to switch spots, guys. I was in my, I'm in my backyard. The kids that had the Cold War already have seen this, but here's my yard. Here's the pool. Here, I'll even go over here just before we get started. Here's where I filmed from yesterday, the bar. But as you can see, the glare is terrible. So I can't even see. Jeez Louise. So this is where a lot of it happens. So still waiting on you guys to come visit. Oh, sorry about the sun. Okay, so anyways, see, we're getting the house painted too. Very exciting, right? Okay, I'm back. So, by the way, where's my class? Carrie, you've been threatening to show up. I don't see you in my backyard, son. And you know, if you were in my house or in my yard, my neighbors would call, right? They'd all call. They'd be like, who are these kids? Anyways, all right, so this is gonna be for 1st, 7th, and 8th this week, and then next week it will be for 2, 5, and 6, and then we'll just keep moving on. We have a couple more chapters to get through. I imagine you guys have all heard that we're out till at least April 15th. So don't do anything stupid. Be smart. Be safe. By the way, guys, I will have these also. Just, you know. Okay, so let's get through this. We're going to start with lectures after you've taken your notes. And then we're going to move on to, I haven't decided yet what activities. We'll get activities, don't worry. Okay, so post-war prosperity and civil rights. First and foremost, when a country finishes with war, what happens to that country? And we all know that thing is called, okay, let's see. If I'm in first period, I know there'll be the first 5, 6 hands up. The rest of you will be like, huh? 7th and 8th, same thing. I'll have the same people answering the question. So, Tuzard, you're not allowed to answer. Gabby, you're not allowed to answer. Patrice, put your hand down, okay? You guys, shut up. Carrie, give me a stupid answer from the back, please. Keegan, oh, you probably aren't here yet. You're probably getting here late because you were waking and baking and you forgot. 7th and 8th, it's hit or miss. 7th, I'll have a lot of the dippers, as I call them, not showing up. My finesse class. Oh, and 8th, oh, wait. And Jason, I'm sure you got a great comment. Hopefully I'll say something today that'll spark a light bulb in your head and you'll get all excited, like, you know, the Steel Town in Pittsburgh or things like that. What else? All right, let's just move on. All right, because once I give my lesson and get online, I get to chill, just like you guys. Okay, let's go back. So after war, we have a thing called demobilization. We all know what that means, right? Demobilization, troops return home. Business tries to convert back from wartime to peacetime, right? Factories are going to change over, all that good stuff. So we know when it comes to demobilization, the economy temporarily slows down so everything can shift back. Now, we were lucky after World War II, we were such a production machine that the economy was just humming along. I mean, we're talking about best it had been probably still. Unbelievable. Everybody had money. Now I'm going to tell you why in a minute. And everybody was spending money, as we've learned. The more people with jobs, the more people that spend money, the more it helps the economy, because as people spend more money, businesses and corporations are able to hire more people, and it's just a cycle. And it's very positive on the economy. Now, one thing that the government did after World War II to really significantly assist the soldiers returning from war, because remember, we had a lot more troops committed in World War II than we had in any previous war. They had a thing called the GI Bill of Rights, otherwise known as the Servicemen Readjustment Act. I hope you can hear me over that noise over there. They're doing construction next door. If it isn't, if you can't, I'll do future lectures inside the house. Okay, anyways. So yeah, the GI Bill of Rights, aka the Servicemen's Readjustment Act. And just so everybody knows, GI came to be known as government issued. It was a thing with the military where everything they got was government issued, you know, clothes, helmets, stuff like that. So they started referring to the soldiers as GIs. There's actually more history to that, but that's not really pertinent right now. So the GI Bill of Rights basically gave soldiers returning home money to start businesses, money to preserve for future education, low interest loans to buy homes, and all that good stuff. So that's what it was all about. It was special benefits to the veterans. Now, what this led to was a lot of veterans having money and be able to come home, get married, and start a family. So one thing that you all think you're funny about is, guess what started right after World War II? Not this, the baby boom. And just to get one thing straight, not a boomer, Gen X, baby. Boomer ended 15 years after World War II. So anybody that tells you different, I disagree with. They're liar. They're dumbasses. Okay, so basically the economy is growing, people are having babies, and let me make this very clear. It was a very, very white, very, very boring society, okay? Remember, we're in the mid-40s. White, 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 white. Still segregation, tons of it. Countries full of white people that love our nation. America's great, we do the best. No matter how much bad things we did to minorities, no matter how many bad things, didn't matter. We love our country. And that was the sentiment. And anybody that talked bad about the country, guess what they were called? Come on. Yeah, a communist. Right. There's a thing that measures our economy called gross national product. I think we talked about it, right? So it's just basically the value of all goods and services in a year in a country. That's all. That's gross national product. And just to give you a some perspective, that number doubled in the 15 years following World War II. Like I said, the economy was great. Income kept rising. Unemployment remained low, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, one thing that happened after the war had to do with FDR. And one thing that was unique about FDR, not that he was a president in a wheelchair, but more importantly was he had been elected 4 terms. So one thing that's going to happen now is they're going to pass the 22nd Amendment during this time period, which limits the president's term to 2. Okay? By the way, term limits, does that remind you of something from the past? It was proposed in 1892. Can you guess? I'll give you a second. And most of you probably don't remember. Too much waking and baking, I guess. Okay, 1892, Omaha Platform, Populist Party, proposed term limits. Now, their term limits were only 1 term, but still, the concept. So now the 22nd Amendment, ratified in 1951, will give us term limits. Okay, we've talked about the San Francisco Conference. We've talked about Dumbarton Oaks and the setting up of the United Nations and all that good stuff. We had now conferences to kind of unite the world monetarily. We're trying to have an international monetary fund so everybody can help each other in the world. So there was a conference called the Bretton Woods Conference that happened in 1944, which actually was technically during the war. And not technically it was, but it was all about getting all the allied countries together to kind of have an international monetary system so everybody can work together. And that way, if one country has money problems, it doesn't just affect that country, everybody can help. They're trying to connect the world. That's what it's all about, remember? Trying to connect everybody, keep everybody together. All right, that's the first slide. So that was easy, right? Okay, now we are moving on to talk about the next president after Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, as hopefully most of you remember, was the president during World War II. Was the general in charge of the Allied forces during D-Day and in World War II, okay? So he was the big chief, oversaw Operation Overlord. Now, let's think. So basically, let's see if we remember some of the things Eisenhower did. He started NASA in response to Sputnik because the Russians had a satellite and we were afraid, they were going to shoot missiles from up there. Other than that, one of the biggest legacies that Eisenhower gave us, or probably the biggest, was he started the federal highway system. Yeah, believe it or not, in 1945, we still did not have highways connecting every state or every city. So now he's going to pass in 1956 the Federal Highway Act. And that's going to do that. It's going to connect all the cities. And just understand, one of the things that this is going to create for this country is the migration to the suburbs. We're going to have tons of people moving out of the cities, middle-class people moving out of the cities into the suburbs. And what we're going to be left with is lower income people in the cities. And that's how this all starts, okay? Because before, everybody was in the cities, or most people. You're either in the country as a farmer or you're in the city. But now we're going to connect the roads, connect the country, and we're going to build suburbs. And for all of you that don't know what suburbs are, they're housing developments outside the city, usually more affordable, usually all the same. Again, remember what I said last slide. Boring, white, everything the same. That's what we're talking about. And that's exactly what the suburbs are, okay? Oh, by the way, the first main suburb in our country was called Levittown in New York. This guy built it, and it was like the model for other suburbs. Okay, so we're going to move on from Dwight D. Eisenhower. See, that's another slide down. And now we're going to talk about civil rights, because that was really the thing that drove this era. So we just, we're fresh, we're off a war. They segregated the troops, if you remember, the Red Tails or the Tuskegee Airmen, the black pilots that flew. So now, what's going to happen? We're going to have a lot more louder voices speaking out, and as we know, the main guy, the Black Jesus, as we call him, Martin Luther the King. Now let's keep perspective. Remember, Frederick Douglass was the original, right? He was the man. Now it's Martin Luther King's turn. And basically, he was all about passive resistance, okay? He was all about fight back with your words and your actions, but not physical violence. And that's what he did. And he was from Montgomery, Alabama. And a lot of stuff's kind of happened under his watch. In 1955, he led the Montgomery bus boycott. And for all of you that don't know, the Montgomery bus boycott was a result of Rosa Parks not moving to the back of the bus. That's how it all started. Whereas we all joke around and say, sitting her lazy butt down. Rosa Parks just sat her lazy butt down, right? But no, in all seriousness, Martin Luther King organized and kind of led that in 1955, which led him to become the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. Again, there were many groups for civil rights back in the day. Obviously in the Deep South is where most of them were, because the North didn't have the same problems with segregation, although they still had their own, but nothing like the South. The South was outwardly racist, and they were horrible. The Deep South, horrible. In my opinion, they're still that way today. It's really sad that these people haven't evolved, but that's why, you look at the Deep South, and probably the worst school systems, the lowest education, the highest literacy rates are in the Deep South for sure. Anyways, so what else? So another famous, probably the most famous, the one you all know about, in 1963, he led the March on Washington. Now, if for any of you that don't know about the March of Washington, I hope you do, but they organized on the Mall in D.C., the Pond, and it was one of the most famous rallies in history, and one of the reasons it was so famous, not just because it was a hundreds of thousands of people protesting civil rights in Washington, D.C., but this is where Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech, okay? March of Washington, 1963, the reflecting pond in D.C., and obviously we all know how everybody knows that speech. I don't need to really discuss it further. He also gave a famous letter to Birmingham jail. Basically, it was just a call for everybody to pursue abolishing segregation with legal channels. It was all about social change for him. And by the way, the letter from Birmingham jail was after one of the a Birmingham rally that turned violent, where the police were beating up the kids and everything. Again, another black eye in our country, the Deep South, as I call them, the rednecks, who just are racist and it's amazing because I think they're jealous because they're so illiterate and the blacks have come so far, and education-wise, they've definitely outpaced the Deep South by far. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality of life. And from his jail cell, he wrote a letter explaining how we should have peaceful resistance and just to do whatever you got to do. But we have to go out and earn, unfortunately, we have to earn our freedom. But again, it was all about peaceful. It wasn't about any violent protests. And one of the things he references in his letter from Birmingham jail is the Boston Tea Party. How our founding fathers, that was peaceful protest. Hit them where it hurts, in the wallet. Okay, unfortunately, King was shot and killed in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968 by James Earl Ray at a hotel. Really messed up. But again, James Earl Ray. By the way, class, you get that name? James Earl Ray, sound a little country? Yeah, exactly. Again, just a racist piece of garbage who shot a very important and wonderful man who was trying to bring positive change to the world. All right, we're moving on. Okay, so now when we go into civil rights, we're on the next slide, just so everybody knows. As we know, there are many organizations that push for civil rights, and most of these organizations were founded by blacks with the help of white people. There were plenty of white people that were totally for integration and were totally opposed to the horrible cycle that had been in this country for racism. The NAACP, we know, right? Everybody knows about them. We've learned about them many times. Founded in the early 1900s by a group of people, including W.B. Du Bois and a lot of other, and a lot of white folks. We had the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE they call it. It was founded in 1940 by many people, and it was influenced by Gandhi and his campaign against the British in India, as we know. So that was another organization. Again, there were just many organizations that propped up in the 40s and 50s for social change. It was all about social change. We also, in the 50s, have the probably landmark case on segregation. We all know it. We've talked about it many times throughout the year. Brown versus the Board of Education, okay? Took place in Kansas. And basically, it was a black father wanting his black daughter to attend a white school that was very close by, rather than being shipped off to the black school that was not close by. And the NAACP sent in Thurgood Marshall. You've heard his name before. First black Supreme Court Justice. He was an attorney for the NAACP at the time. You guys know what the NAACP is, right? Yeah, okay, very funny. Or as they say in barbershop, NAACP. Anyways, so that, you know, that was another blow at segregation, which was a good thing. Unfortunately, you still had states that would not segregate, not integrate their schools. Alabama, famous governor, was one of the most racist guys in the world. And he famously, hold on one second, I gotta pause this for once. Oh no, I'm not pausing. I'm gonna keep going, screw it. Where was I at? I forgot where I was now, shoot. Oh, Alabama, Mississippi, all these horrible states that were refusing the Supreme Court's edict that said, and the Supreme Court ruled that segregation does nothing but make other people feel inferior. And so they integrated the schools. Now, it took quite a long time for that to happen, especially in the South. In fact, some of their tactics were closing all the public schools and just having private schools to not allow blacks to integrate with whites. In certain cases, they had to send the National Guard down. Arkansas, the Little Rock Nine, they sent the National Guard in to escort these kids around. Alabama, Governor George Wallace, one of the most racist SOBs on the planet ever. Horrible human being. He blocked the schools. He says, I'm not letting people in. Alabama's a white state, a segregated state, and will remain segregated. So this all happened throughout this, unfortunately. So yeah, that's, I'm going to flip the slide because I think we covered most of this stuff. Let's go over some more of, I'm just flipping the slide, but there's more on civil rights. That's what we're talking about. We had things like sit-ins, where blacks would go to the counters. That was a big thing. You go to a drugstore and at the counter, they'd serve you food like a diner. So, and their counters were all white, whites only. So the blacks would go sit in at the counters, black students usually, And they wouldn't leave until they were dragged out, literally dragged out by the police. And they would. They'd be dragged out. That's how it was. Yeah, the South was a horrible place in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Just racist and ignorant and very unfortunate. But, that comes from many years of inbreeding. We all know that, right? It's very unfortunate, but this is the country and the world we live in, and as much as it's gotten so much better, there's so much racist sentiment still in this country, and it's a shame. Sorry, I'm soapboxing. All right, let's get back to it. So what else? There were freedom riders. So basically, freedom riders, and they did this throughout the South. Blacks and whites would get on buses, interracial couples, get on buses, sit in the white section, hold hands, and drive through towns. Needless to say, there was lots of violence aimed at them. They got the crap beat out of them, beaten, thrown in jail. Some of them were dragged away and never found again. It's so messed up. But it's always going to be that for people that are trying to blaze a new path and end segregation, try to end racism. What else? One thing to go back on and touch, I forgot. So when I talked about the Civil Rights Bill in 1963, the March on Washington in 1963 by Martin Luther King and several other important leaders, the specifics of it were they were in D.C. to support President Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill, okay? So one of the things which we think got Kennedy killed, we know, is the Civil Rights Bill. He was very pro-civil rights, and a lot of white racist a-holes did not appreciate that. So that was it. What else? Yeah, so we're going to move on to the next one. See, we're getting through this, guys. This isn't too bad. Because remember, this whole section, we got another thing on civil rights and a couple more things on civil rights we're going to touch on. But anyways, I forgot how many pages there were. All right, we're moving on. We're moving on, people. Look on the bright side. We get the 60s next. We get to talk about hallucinogenics and rock and roll and a counterculture. Just bad-mouthing the government and all that. Okay, whoops, made a mess. Okay, we're almost done. What else? Okay, so this is a good segue. So we were talking about the March on Washington. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson. Guys, LBJ on the test, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Not LeBron James, you idiots. Clowns. Lyndon Baines Johnson, okay? He was the president that replaced Kennedy after Kennedy was assassinated. He pushed the Civil Rights Bill through using the sympathy of Congress to his benefit because they were, because Kennedy had just been assassinated. Now, Johnson, they all thought they had him, the Southern Democrats, because he was a Texan, probably a little racist, but he was really big on helping poor people. So that was a big hot button for him, helping lower income. So he pushed the Civil Rights Act through. And basically, it's what you think. It was all about prohibiting discrimination based on race and color and sex and all that, religion. And basically, it applied to anything. Theaters, restaurants, trade unions. It was a very big deal. Sorry about the phone, guys. Believe it or not, that's a group text from all the social studies teachers. And they don't stop. It's like they have nothing better to do. Just do your job and you'll be okay. Anyways, what else? Let's see. So some of the highlights of the Civil Rights Bill. It cut federal funding for segregated schools. So if school districts were segregated, guess what? You weren't getting your money, honey. So that was good. They were, let's see, trying to have equal employment and equal trade for everybody. So we weren't just giving all the jobs to the white people and letting the white people handle everything. I mean, it was all set up to integrate minorities into our society better than they were, because as it stood, they weren't integrated in enough. So this was a way to get them in. Okay, what else? This is something we talked about many, many times. 24th Amendment was passed now. Now we're at that point. 1964, 24th Amendment. You know what that did? Eliminated poll taxes. So now we're going to do away with all that crap. Poll taxes, literacy tests. A lot of that was already done away with in individual states, fortunately. But now it's going to be an amendment. It's all gone. No more of that crap. What else? The Voting Rights Act of 65, it just added to it. And that, again, we had already eliminated poll taxes, now literacy tests. So they kind of flow. Okay, so 1964 Civil Rights Act got rid of, and 24th Amendment next got rid of poll taxes. Now we have the Voting Rights Act. We're going to get rid of literacy tests. But again, it's all part of this cycle of trying to have a integrated society and give more civil rights. In fact, we're going to learn about it because in the 50s, we have a thing called the Warren Court, and we have a gentleman named Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, very liberal, very big into social reform. So we're going to learn about him soon, but that's in the next, I don't think that's this section. Okay, so we're going to move on. Next page. In 1961, they had a thing called affirmative action, and it basically said to employers, you have to hire a certain amount of minorities regardless. Now, it was a long time coming, even though it didn't work totally great, because what you're going to find is employers have to hire minorities even if they're not as qualified as non-minorities. But considering the past couple hundred years and how bad it's been for minorities, good for them. It was well needed. And that was another thing that happened during this era, after of the push for civil rights. Because now we're in the early '60s, and when we get to the section on the '60s, which is next, we're going to learn all about the counterculture, and everything is about, look, government, you're doing it wrong. Let's fix this. We need to integrate people and love everybody, and yeah, that's the way it should be. Everybody love one another. Let's all get along. That kind of thing. The '60s was very unique. Okay, so. Actually, for a lot of you guys, what else happened? What did President Johnson do? Let's see. He hired some black cabinet members. I mean, it was, again, this whole period was about social reform. And the 50s and 60s. It was all about civil rights and social reform. We're going to help people as much as we can. There were some famous court cases. Actually, affirmative action came into play. So, Regents of the University of California versus BACK, B-A-K-K-K-E. And basically, the Supreme Court upheld affirmative action, and a white former Vietnam vet, a Vietnam vet in the 70s was denied access to a medical school because the spots were all filled. And when he fought, he said, look, you filled all the spots with minorities. I'm more qualified. I deserve to be admitted too. And it was interesting because the Supreme Court of California struck down that program as a violation of rights, and basically ordered him in. The Supreme Court of California said, you have to admit this guy. Even though we let a certain amount of minorities in, which was affirmative action, and that's okay, we can't deny people that are eligible and would qualify just because they're not minorities. It's the whole idea. A lot of court cases are going to come from this. Okay, we're moving on. Let's talk about one or two things that happened let's talk about the big thing that happened on, one more thing we go back to in civil rights. I'm sorry, I should have done this back in the other one, but it was in the 1960s, so it's okay. It's all part of this, what happened after Martin Luther King. The Selma to Montgomery March. So the Selma, Alabama, by the way, to Montgomery, Alabama. So here's what happened. There was a march that the blacks had, and a lot of whites. By the way, a lot of whites joined in on these marches. A lot of pro-civil rights whites. So here's what happened. So these protesters marched from Selma to Montgomery, okay? By the way, Montgomery's the state capital. 54 miles they marched. Police, townspeople, everybody attacked them. State troopers, it was awful. So it took place, it started on March 7th, 1965, okay? They basically attacked everybody. I mean, attacked everybody. And, I mean, tear gas, billy clubs are beating kids. It was so messed up. It became known as Bloody Sunday. And it really freaked the nation out. Remember, 60s, we got TV. People see this live, and they're freaking out. And it basically, it just came to a head. I mean, they murdered a civil rights activist and named James Reeves. And basically that was it. People went after the federal government in Alabama. They're like, how could you let this happen? And so Bloody Sunday is forever known as a landmark event in the struggle for civil rights, for minorities. What else? Let's see. really not much else. Oh, some of the players. Yes, some of the players. Okay, let's talk about some of the players back in the day. We have the Nation of Islam. We know about the Malcolm X, right? Joined the Nation of Islam. And they were militant. And they wanted the blacks to form their own nation. They didn't want blacks to integrate. They wanted their own nation to fight the whites, basically. They didn't want them to integrate into white society. So Malcolm X was their leader for many years. And he converted the Nation of Islam in prison, became one of their leaders, and then he actually broke free and became more passive and started becoming more sympathetic to King's wishes of pacifism. He eventually gets assassinated by members of the Nation of Islam. It's just crazy. I mean, he's not alone, and all these organizations are militant, and if you don't like what they say, they kill you. It happens everywhere. It's still happening today. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was another group. One of the founders was a guy named Stokely Carmichael, by the way. Now, Stokely Carmichael was famous for, and he eventually moved back to Africa, but he was famous for using this right here as a symbol of black power. Black power, okay? Black power. As opposed to that video we all watched, right? Clayton Bigsby, white power. How about black power? Black power. So anyways, there's that famous picture of the two U.S. athletes on the podium in the Olympics in the 60s, holding their armed fists up. Stokely Carmichael made that a call to arms for blacks, basically. Black power. Call for blacks to unite, that kind of stuff. We also had the Black Panthers, founded by Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, and they were a militant black organization in California. Actually, they started in Oakland. They did good things. They helped kids with homework and all that, but they policed the streets, and they were definitely militant. And they carried weapons, and I mean, why not? The whites were doing it to them. They should get them back. That's pretty much it. What else? Oh, I think I left one thing out. The Nation of Islam was led by Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X was just one of the members. I misspoke. I think I said he was the leader. It was Elijah Muhammad. I apologize for that. What else? I think that covers most of the stuff that we have in our curriculum for that period of time. Just remember, it was interesting. Right after the war, very white, very boring, lots of missionary stuff. Well, that applies to a lot of you. Not to take a shot at you, Sebastian Six, but, or a lot of others in my room. But yeah, not to take a total shot at that, but it was a very different time. Tuzard's probably a missionary if he ever gets any. And it was very different. We had a very white, boring culture, but now what's going to happen is we're going to get blacks really pushing civil rights, whites joining along, and it's going to transition into the 60s with the counterculture, where everybody's like, no, everybody should be together and love everybody, no more bullshit. This is ridiculous. So anyways, that's another lesson. This is civil rights. I'll post another one for next week. 1, 7, and 8 get this week. 2, 5, and 6 get this next week. And we're moving on to the 60s, baby. Yeah. Okay, well, hope everybody's staying safe. My pool's empty. By the way, just for a note, you see? Guys, where are you guys, bro? Come on, I need somebody here. Be on my pool. Come on. That'll be me later with a beer, guys. I promise that'll be me later. Haha, in your face. Wait, did that not get it? Oh, okay. Just want to make sure I get the gist of what's going on here. Stella, say good morning. There's Stella. Say good morning. That's Stella, everybody. All right. Anyways, I'm out. Until next time. Peace out, Girl Scouts. All right, ciao. Oh, that didn't work.